Hey, you are tuning in to the Cover One Fantasy Show. I am one of your three amigos, Greg Tompsett, and finally, all three amigos are back together. Rich Haynes, Anthony Prohaska. Rich, welcome back.
Well, hey, thanks. Yeah, it's been a busy October for me. I obviously did a little bit of that live stream from the Bourbon Trail a couple weeks back, and then I was in Seattle and actually got to do the show in Seattle from the hotel. And then this last Thursday was Browns Broncos, so I was unable to attend. But yeah, it's good to be back. I missed your faces because I'm a huge Broncos fan. Teddy Bridgewater.
Love Teddy Bridgewater.
I mean that QB matchup on Thursday Night Football between Bridgewater and Case Keenum. I mean, it got me hotter under the collar. You know what I'm saying?
Quarterback play.
Oh my goodness!
Your daughter scared the hell out of me. I thought it was like a ghost in the back by your fantasy trophy. Oh my god!
Spectral beings float into the back.
She wanted to make an appearance on the show today.
My heart.
I was going to say, so Anthony, besides your recent coronary, how's the rest of your day going?
Oh, man. Day's going good. Excited for the Bills to be off the bye. Some fantasy things are going good, and it's a busy time now in fall. Football it's crazy that we're in the end of October already, but football is more meaningful now in college and the NFL. NBA has started. Hockey season is in full swing. Champions League has started for soccer. Baseball is dead to me, so I don't have to worry about that anymore. But there's a lot going on, and fantasy is revving up as we move forward, which we're going to talk about a little tonight. So I feel very busy, but thankful for all the work and excited for this weekend and excited to not have my heart jump out of my chest for the rest of the night, hopefully.
Well, you never know. I can't promise that. So
yeah, try to survive. It's a interesting time. Obviously, everybody. Last week we talked about the Bypocalypse and the Byemageddon and how to survive. 6 fantasy relevant teams. What do we count? 29 fantasy relevant players that were out. So being in that kind of spot, it's a tough situation. And now that we've made it through, like this week, there's only 2. Don't ask me why the NFL had 6 last week in week 7 and 2 in week 8. Little weird.
I don't understand.
Going into that, there's a couple other tough ones coming up. There's some good next week. Tampa Bay is out. That's a lot of fantasy impactful players. The Rams are coming up. There's some good players coming up. So buys aren't done, but there's none as bad as last week. So now you start to get into, okay, how do we start structuring our teams? We got some good questions we'll get to off of Twitter of, hey, do you still go after these flyer guys that might be 1 week by week fill-ins, or do you go more handcuffed to your studs and try to prepare yourself of what's there? We'll talk through some things like that. The trade deadline's coming. The NFL trade deadline's next week. Fantasy League trade deadlines are in the next 2 to 3 weeks, depending on some are next week, the week after, the one after that. So are there targets to go after, guys that you should go through? So shoot us any, start-sit questions, anything that's out there. But let's start. Rich, as you're coming back in, and as your teams are, that you have on a roll. I'm in a couple leagues. I'm in one with you where you're undefeated. What are some of the things you start to maybe shift your mindset of what you're looking towards and how you're starting to prepare your teams moving forward?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, the trade deadline's the biggest piece of that puzzle right now. So, I'm certainly looking for players that can maybe make my teams better. For those that are in contention, for keeper leagues, if I'm out of it, I'm obviously trying to, look for the future a little bit. And when I'm looking to look for those trades or try to acquire the people, I actually take a look at the bye weeks, and I like to maybe try to acquire guys that have their bye week already have passed. If it's like a coin flip between 2 players, because now I don't have to worry about them being out. Or on the flip side of that, if there's a player that is really good and has a bye week coming up, I might try to use that in the trade talks with the other with the other owner and go, hey, by the way, yeah, maybe you're giving me a player that is a little bit better, however you're hurting this week on a bye, so this is going to help you out, you need to get this win. So I'll look at the standings. That's how I approach it. So I'll take a look at the standings, look at, okay, those middle tier teams that have to win, look at their players and go, okay, hey, maybe there's a guy I can get for a little bit cheaper because they have a bye coming up. Or again, flip side,
or on by that week,
or
on by right. They need a win right then.
If I have some depth and can take that player on and just shove them on my bench, for a minute, I definitely look to do that. So, but trades all about trades right now for me. I mean, obviously we're still a little bit away from the playoffs, so it's all about trades and trying to manage those bye weeks, which last week, as everybody felt, was awful. So,
Anthony, how about you look? Go ahead.
No, Anthony, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So I was just going to ask Anthony the same kind of question. How do you start to prepare yourself and start to look at whether it's pickups, whether it's trade targets? And we'll even talk in a minute about, sometimes it's harder redraft leagues, same during the year. Sometimes it's hard to get teams that are out of it to trade because what are they getting out of it? That's more of a thing in dynasty and keeper leagues where you can entice them with, hey, this guy's a really good value for next year. Why don't you give me somebody who's, maybe a short upgrade this year? How do you start to look at that in some of your leagues to prepare for coming forward?
Well, number one, I try to acquire guys who I think will score a lot of fantasy points. It's a great first step.
Yep, first step.
Laying the foundation. I start there. And then conversely, I try to avoid guys who I don't think will score as many fantasy points. And to Rich's point, and really build on that, I think a lot of it, this comes back to one of the things we talked about in our draft prep leading up to the season, knowing your league, knowing the other people in your league, who is willing to deal, and just from that perspective, starting there and then going from there. Greg, I love the point you just made. If you got a team that's sitting there at like 1-6 and it's not a keeper league or it's not dynasty, they might be like, no, my season's screwed. Nobody talked to me about fantasy. I don't want to do anything. I like to aim, if I'm trying to build or go do something for a playoff run, I like to go for those teams that are 4-3 or maybe 3-4 who need to make a move, who need something to juice their lineup a little bit, turn something around, or maybe again, this is where it comes in play of knowing who is in your league. Maybe, you got a buddy who's super frustrated with Calvin Ridley, and you're like, you know what? I'm a little higher on Calvin Ridley, and I know the target share he's getting, and maybe I can make a move for Calvin Ridley, and I like his schedule and favorable matchups down the stretch and so on and so on and so forth. Starting to look at guys who you can potentially target to reinforce your team. You got to start with, obviously, the fantasy perspective, but right there, almost like a 1A, 1B scenario, is knowing the other people in your league, who's willing to deal, what their records are, how they feel, who they have, what's their roster construction. And then honestly, starting with a legitimate trade offer. Don't come to someone. I got a buddy of mine who, Greg, you and I talked about it last week offline. His number one tight end is Kyle Pitts, and his backup tight end is CJ Uzoma. And this guy came to him and was trying to trade him Dalton Schultz for his Cortland Sutton, and tried convincing him that, well, Schultz is way better in your flex than Cortland Sutton is, and honestly could probably start at tight end. In what world is Dalton Schultz starting over Kyle Pitts? I just don't do that. When you do that, when you start, when that's your leadoff point, you turn people off right away. So come from a point of honesty, try to open some dialogue, and do diligent research and try to meet in the middle in order to make your team better.
Why don't we jump into some of the questions we got here in the chat? We can kind of pivot back to some of the things. A couple questions that are right there for tonight. Rich, what are you thinking for Zach Ertz tonight against the Packers? Maybe a limited Hopkins or Mike Gesicki, with him and Waddle are like the only people that are there. Maybe a little tougher defensive matchup with Buffalo. Half-point PPR. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I actually really like Mike Gesicki. I know we were going to talk about trade targets in general, and this kind of leads into that a little bit. I actually kind of like Mike Gesicki and Jalen Waddle for kind of like not your well-known top-tier players for trade targets, because I think Tua's actually played really well the last two games, at least from a fantasy perspective. Against the Bills specifically, I expect you guys to pound the Dolphins a little bit, so they're going to be behind. They're going to have to throw. And Gesicki, it's interesting if you look at his year-to-date stats at the tight end position, he's, depending on your scoring format, he's up there in the top 5, from a tight end standpoint. It was just
the super weird week 1.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, he got, he's getting consistent 7-8 target games. So I really like Mike Gesicki this weekend moving forward, honestly, with the Dolphins. So I would lean Mike Gesicki. I mean, obviously Ertz is the name, and I know especially in Buffalo, you guys all want to trade for him all offseason, but he's a Cardinal now. I know Evan Ingram's on your mind a little bit now, but he's a Cardinal now. So especially only a week and a half or so into the offense, I would probably definitely lean Mike Gesicki and roll with that. And as a Bills fan too, as you watch the game, hopefully you're pounding the Dolphins, and then can root for some Gesicki scores, at the end of the game.
Anthony, anything different?
No, I second that notion. Gesicki has been a very reliable piece all year for Miami. He's got a good rapport with Tua. It's really just him and Waddle. I think game script this week also favors him. And then just from a Cardinals perspective, their offense is fantastic, but they spread it around so much. And there's a lot of I think you have a higher chance of getting more target share, more volume for Mike Gesicki with a potential favorable game script than, even though the Cards, knock on wood, should put up points against Green Bay. Ertz is just amongst many other mouths that have to be fed in that offense.
Yeah, he's spot on. And just to reinforce that a little bit further, Zach Ertz did look like he had a nice first game and introduction with Arizona. It was still only 3 catches. And if there isn't kind of that crackback block on as he's running a crossing route
from Christian, yeah,
probably should have been
downfield.
like a 15-yard play, not a 47-yard touchdown. All of a sudden, he's probably a lot closer to like 3 catches for 30 and no touchdown, and everybody's like, oh, okay, well, he's there. And what realistically is in my mind, he's good for Arizona in real football. It's another guy you have to worry about. He's good finding the spots in the zone. Again, so many mouths to feed.
Yeah.
I don't feel comfortable. I don't know that I feel comfortable with anybody besides DeAndre Hopkins as a week-to-week start there. You can fill in other guys, but Kirk's starting to go up. But even last week, Kirk was still 4 for 50. He scored on the one, so it gives you a little more. But it's still tough. So I think you're spot on. I think Gesicki's kind of an easy one in that spot. We'll jump here to the next question. Daryl Williams. Alex Collins or Elijah Mitchell.
I like his back half. Or how will Shanahan
screw me this week. So, Elijah Mitchell, like 116 and a touchdown last week. Alex Collins had a really good game 2 weeks ago, over 100 yards. Last week, barely anybody did anything in that Saints Seahawks game. Literally only Kamara and DK Metcalf. Daryl Williams has actually looked decent. And has an okay matchup with the Giants. We'll start with you, Anthony. Any strong feelings out of those 3?
Oh, Collins is definitely a far third for me. It's between Mitchell and Williams. I think
Mitchell against the Bears on the road.
With no Khalil Mack for Chicago. He's out this week. I'm going to lean Daryl Williams. I think the Chiefs have to come out on primetime, make a statement against a somewhat wounded Giants team. I think they put up a bunch of points against the Giants. I just think you have the safer floor for Daryl Williams than you do Mitchell. I'm also a believer in the whole West Coast teams coming, I guess in this instance, coming Midwest. And that Bears defense isn't as bad as everybody wants to think it is or say that it is. I know they had a terrible outing against Tampa. I think you could be okay with Mitchell or Williams, but I'm going to lean Daryl Williams here, like 53-47, Daryl Williams.
Rich, who are you leaning between? Would you put Collins equal with them, or are you Williams or Mitchell yourself?
Ooh, silent auction.
We lost you for a second, Rich.
Collins is he's a little banged up as well. So I don't. Yeah, I agree. I think Collins is a third for me. That Seattle team without Wilson's not quite the same. So I would probably not go Alex Collins. I think I would lean Elijah Mitchell. I really liked what he did last week against San Francisco, and the Chiefs are just they're just in a rough spot right now. They're not playing well. Now I agree. Like they need to come out. They need to kind of show that they can right the ship a little bit. But Patrick Mahomes
they needed to do that last week too.
Well, he got blasted last week. I mean, he took that rough hit to the head and neck area.
Well, the Titans are the best team in the
NFL. Of course. So I'm not sure how that offense is gonna react this week with him a little dinged up. So I'm gonna lean Elijah Mitchell and go. Shanahan is not gonna screw you this week for whatever reason. Trey Sermon is in the doghouse there. Mostert's still down. So I think Elijah Mitchell is a player I would look to start this week.
I also think, though, potentially Rich is super biased because he loves Kyle Shanahan. So I feel like obviously he's going to pick Elijah Mitchell.
I think Kyle Shanahan's one of the most overrated coaches in the league, but I still will go Elijah Mitchell this week.
And I would say I don't think there's a right or wrong answer between those two. I think they're both solid, and honestly, this week probably low end RB1, higher level RB2s. I think they're both 12 to 15 point guys. I think you got a shot at 100 yards and a touchdown with either one. I don't think either one's going to put you in a rough spot or be a bad start. But yeah, I think it's, you could trust your gut between those two. It's definitely Williams or Mitchell. A lot of teams right now probably need both those guys. They're looking to put one in a running back spot, maybe another in a flex, depending on how the rest of your roster is shaping up. That's not a bad spot to be in.
And actually, one more comment on that.
Good.
One more quick comment on that before we go into chicken noodle soup, which I like the name. If Mahomes is actually out this week, I may have leaned, hey, they're going to have to run the ball with Daryl Williams. But I mean, God, the Chiefs just don't run the football. They just don't run the football. I don't care who the running back is. There's just not a lot of carries there. So that's another thing. If Mahomes was dinged and going to sit this week, I would maybe lean the other way. But that's another vote the other way for Elijah in my mind.
For your boy Shanahan.
For my boy Kaiir.
So, chicken noodle soup. I think Aaron Jones is maybe one of the number one overall players this week. There's so little going on with Devontae Adams out and Marquez Valdes-Scantling out and Allen Lazard out. I think this offense is going to have a lot of Aaron Jones.
This is also so much an Aaron Jones week that he'll put up like 20 yards on 4 carries and like 1 catch for 7 yards.
Yeah. Obviously, you don't know that it's going to go back to early in the season with his 4 touchdown game and things like that. James Robinson is also a great start. Mm-hmm. If you're asking that question, your team's in really freaking good shape. If you're at this point in the year and you can afford to have James Robinson or Aaron Jones on your bench, God bless you. Your team's in great shape. I don't know that I'm benching Aaron Jones for just about anybody this week. You're short of like Kamara and people like that. It would have to be a stud for me to bench Aaron Jones.
Second that notion completely. Cardinals with J.J. Watt stepping out a little bit, and their D has been very porous against the run game. This, again, so might get some bad luck, but this screams Aaron Jones for this week for Green Bay. He's a tremendous start. I really want to know the rest of the roster construction here because how is James Robinson not like a top flex for you? Or maybe he drafted early and got him because people thought ETN was the guy. Yeah. But a fun situation to be in for chicken noodle soup. But Aaron Jones, 1,000%.
Rich, this is one of the gentlemen who wrote us on Twitter earlier, I believe. I think Shay is the guy who tweeted us about this question for tonight, where he has DeAndre Hopkins or Cooper. He actually shared the rest of his roster with us.
Stacked.
He's got a great team, and it legitimately is. I poked around for a little bit to try to figure out, why wouldn't you start both guys? He's in a pretty good spot. Matter of fact, I can pull the tweet up now just to share where he was at.
He responded to the comments and said, "Yep, that's me." On Twitter.
So I'm going to pull in. Now, these are the kind of situations that you're going to be in for the teams who are looking at playoff runs, and you're going to be in tough spots like this where, hey, DeAndre Hopkins is in a place where, he was limited with a hamstring issue. So he's, James Robinson, Damian Harris, solid in the running back spots, but then Hopkins, Jefferson, Brandon Cooks, Emmanuel Sanders, and then even on the bench, right now he's got Amari Cooper and Robbie Anderson sitting on the bench, Daryl Williams sitting on the bench. So really, really strong roster overall. I think that Cooks, Jefferson are for sure locks. Sanders has been playing well. I think that Sanders, Hopkins, and Cooper are in a pretty similar tier. Hopkins healthy is easily above that. Yes. Hopkins may be dinged up. Is he on a snap count? Is a question. But my comment on Twitter was, if Cliff Kingsbury is starting DeAndre Hopkins, so are you. That's how I would handle it. Are you guys far off of that? Or if it's not that, if you agree with the Hopkins part, what are you on Sanders versus Cooper? We'll start with you, Rich.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. I would start Nuke tonight. Cooper is been interesting this year. He had that gigantic week 1 where he put up, a boatload of points, and then he's kind of fallen off a little bit, in my opinion, since then. So, if the Bills had a different matchup where I would think that the game would still be, close in the second half of the, second half, I may actually lean Manny Sanders over Cooper, but because I think the Bills are going to blow him out and maybe not pass the ball as much in the second half of the game, I would probably give Cooper the nod over Sanders. But I agree, I would go Hopkins over Cooper because his target share hasn't been that great. I was going there on bye last week, but the 3-4 weeks preceding that, his target share hasn't been stellar. So I would go Hopkins, Cooper, and then Emmanuel Sanders, although I would probably pick Manny Sands over him if the matchup was better. But the Bills basically are on bye for a month because of their schedules. So.
Yeah. Dolphins, Jags, Jets is a nice warm up coming up of the bye. It's the FCS portion of the schedule.
You got to hope you remember how to play football in 4 weeks.
Yes.
Yeah. This is when Alabama plays Chattanooga State or whatever.
Yes.
Knock on wood, not to jinx it. Yeah, no, I don't even want to spend too much time on it. I completely echo Rich's sentiments. I think if the game script were different for the Bills, I'd start Manny, but I think the game script actually works against him in this game. I think the Bills potentially could go up and then just here you go, Zach Moss and Devin Singletary, and we'll go from there. So because of that, granted, the Dak injury makes me a little nervous, and if we somehow get something early Sunday where Dak is sitting, this throws a whole wrench into that mix. But Nuke is a stud. You're starting Nuke. I would put Amari Cooper in there ahead of Emmanuel Sanders. And then keep an eye on Dak's status and potentially fill Manny in from there. But I'd sit Manny.
Yeah. And I'm just going to give Shay some kudos. On ESPN, they have Daryl Williams projected to score more points than Damian Harris. Damian Williams against the Jets, Daryl Williams against the Giants, Damian Harris against the Chargers. I agree with him to start Damian Harris against the Chargers. I think that the Patriots are going to do everything in their power to take the air out of the ball and to run 4-minute drill and to keep the ball out of Justin Herbert's hands, and are going to try to just pound the rock the whole time. And Harris has looked fantastic the last 2 weeks. So even though it's projected to score more, I agree with you that you have Damian Harris in there slightly ahead of Daryl Williams. But again, the fact that you're in a spot where Amari Cooper and Robbie Anderson and Dawson Knox and Daryl Williams are on your bench and Kareem Hunt on your IR, you are set up well for a playoff run here, my friend.
You would like a good Damian Harris week, Greg, since you have him on 79 teams.
Like all of the teams.
Every time he does anything good, I'm immediately like, Greg.
Hey, all right. Our man Adam, who is always an active contributor in the Slack channel. Make sure you guys are checking out our premium memberships that are out there. You can come ask us questions in the Slack channel. Adam asking here, what do you think the value of Mitchell for Claypool or Collins for Galladay? So 2 different potential trades. Elijah Mitchell for Chase Claypool, Alex Collins for Kenny Galladay. Let's do them one at a time. I'll start with Elijah Mitchell and Claypool. Claypool is off to a weird start. He's got two, maybe 3 good games, a bunch of weird games. He's missed a game. Pittsburgh overall is kind of odd. I like him as a talent better than Elijah Mitchell, but I will say running back is a wasteland right now. There's your handful of studs at the top and then a bunch of nothing. And Elijah Mitchell looks like a pretty steady 80 yards and a decent chance to score most weeks. A lot of teams need that in their RB2 spot. So if you are in a position of strength where you happen to have, Kamara and James Robinson and Elijah Mitchell as your flex guy, as your bench guy, and you're struggling for that third wide receiver, maybe. And again, I probably like Claypool as a talent, but there's an awful lot of depth at receiver right now, and I'd be hard-pressed to trade any starting running back right now without getting a decidedly winning return where, I can't turn this down. Rich, I see you nodding your head. I assume, even though you obviously do prefer the wide receiver side of things mostly, what do you think about that
trade? Especially a Steelers
trade?
wide receiver because he loves the Steelers.
Well, which is funny. I actually own Chase Claypool in the 7-0 auction league. So, setting aside the Steelers hate there for a second. But if he was trying to make the decision between those 2 trades, Greg, I agree with everything you said. That's why I was shaking my head. But if he's saying, I want to turn running back depth into a wide receiver, I'm certainly trying to go get Chase Claypool over Kenny Galladay. So, I think that maybe there's some other targets, and while Anthony comments on this, I can look up a couple for him. Maybe there's some players other than Claypool you could try to stretch that value from an Elijah Mitchell standpoint. But I would much rather have Claypool if I needed a wide receiver over Kenny Galladay, who just can't stay on the field. And even if he gets on the field, who knows? That Giants team's weird. Everyone's injured every week, it seems, across the entire offense. So, granted, Alex Collins is also banged up, but I just don't think you're going to get anything back there. If you need a wide receiver, I don't think Galladay is going to help you win down the stretch. So that deal's kind of not not great in my opinion. So I would definitely
How about one of the names?
Try to stretch that value.
How about one of the names Anthony threw out earlier? Maybe you're the Calvin Ridley owner in your league is
Would love that.
frustrated or giving up. He's one I'd take a shot at before Claypool if you could.
Yeah, I think that's the overall for me. I'm just looking up some like tiers and how guys are ranked right now, and if we're going just straight value, like, well, I'd rather have Chase Claypool than Kenny Golladay because of the injury risk, and you just don't know what you're going to get out of Golladay. Of these two trades, I would much rather do Collins for Golladay because I think there may be even a slight value upgrade there, and I wouldn't want to trade Elijah Mitchell. If you're trading Elijah Mitchell, I'm just taking a peek at some rankings in terms of other receivers who he's ranked around in the same tier. Emmanuel Sanders, Brandon Cooks, Jalen Waddle, Tyler Lockett. He's in a tier with a decent amount of wide receivers. I think you could potentially shoot a little higher than Chase Claypool. Again, if you need wide receiver depth, I love what you said in the beginning. I love Chase Claypool as a talent. I don't like him as much in this fantasy instance. I think Mitchell holds much more value, and you could aim a little higher in terms of that wide receiver tier of who you're aiming for. But again, depending on your roster construction, if you need a receiver, it's not a bad stab.
Yeah.
So, to kind of play off of that, there was a comment earlier on that, you could get Shanahan though. They like to change that running back in and out in San Francisco really quickly.
Yeah,
so,
Jeff Wilson comes off PUP and they give him the job for some reason.
Who knows? Right. So actually a guy that I kind of like to stay within the AFC North and go to one of my other rivals that has had a quietly really good season, in my opinion, is Hollywood Brown for the Ravens. He's looked really nice.
Not to Bart Scott, he hasn't.
Not to Bart Scott. But I mean, look, some of the target games, he's had a 14 target game, 2 10 target games, a 7 target game. He's got 5-6 touchdowns on the season, 2 100-yard performances. So, in that offense with Lamar, I would trust a lot more than the Steelers' offense with Ben Roethlisberger. So maybe that's a guy that, again, he doesn't really have that name value yet, that maybe you could stretch Elijah Mitchell's value for and go get Marquise Brown from the Baltimore Ravens.
Great suggestion. Well done.
I like that one a lot. We got one here, a team struggling a little bit more to fill in a spot.
What a question.
This is not that different from the post I made earlier this week where I literally dropped Mike Davis in a league because I thought, Anthony called it last week and said, watch the Houston backfield. It's not pretty, but if one of the guys gets traded and you go from 3 mouths down to 2, maybe there's some value in a spot here. And I was like, you want to know what? I'll take a stab at David Johnson, I guess. And Allen Robinson's kind of getting to that point where if you have a chance to pick someone up, I had someone ask me about, somebody dropped Sterling Shepard for the bye week and had to get a fill in. And they're like, hey, should I drop Allen Robinson for Sterling Shepard? And like my instinct was like, nah, that's crazy. Don't do that. And I was like, yeah, maybe you should. Now this question, are you starting Marquez Callaway or Allen Robinson?
Don't lead off with me. Don't lead off with me.
Man, honestly, off the top of my head, I probably would go Marquez Callaway against the Buccaneers secondary. The Saints are likely going to be behind in that game. That secondary is not great. They're at home, which I like. I prefer New Orleans at home, even though Drew Brees isn't on the team anymore. I feel like the Saints always played bad away from the dome, and I still feel that way. Now, Jameis Winston put up a stinker of a game in prime time here this past week, but Marquez Callaway is still getting a somewhat decent target share. I believe he had 8 last
7 and 8
week.
last year.
7 last week, 8 the week before.
Yep.
So, at least he's going to get some opportunities in that passing game. And Traquan Smith, when he came back last week, didn't do himself any favors. He looked lost on the field a little bit. And Jameis Winston was kind of yelling at him. So I would probably lean Marquez Callaway in this one. I like Justin Fields. I think he's eventually going to be a decent quarterback. But, that coaching staff, Matt Nagy in Chicago, is not doing them any favors right now. And Allen Robinson is not getting the target share he's used to in his career, 4.7, 5.36. The preceding 5 weeks here. So, and 4 before that. He's really had only one Allen Robinson game all year, and that was week 1 where he had 11 targets. So I'm going to go Marquez Callaway.
Yeah. If Allen Robinson had anyone else's name, he would be dropped in every league. It's just people hanging on to the fact that his value the last couple of years, he was the quarterback-proof guy because it didn't matter. He just got fed volume. he's not getting fed volume. Without that, he's not quarterback proof anymore. We are only holding him for name recognition and name value. And it's a weird spot. Anthony, anything different before we move on?
No, I was just looking up on the year. Allen Robinson has 40 targets over 7 games. That's an average of 5.7 targets a game. Not even a full 6 targets.
What's
a
that
game.
like 2 Cooper Cup games?
No, it's like 1 drive of Cooper Cup. Like, it's just unreal. And especially too, you would think with like a rookie quarterback, it would be like, all right, well, we got a stud over there. Let's just feed the stud.
Reasons to draft him were valid. Like it made sense because you had you had the initial, hey, if Andy Dalton plays, he's going to feed Allen Robinson, and then maybe you have the scoring upside of Justin Fields, and man, that entire situation.
And he's been and Nagy is familiar with Robinson. He's been in this offense. He's worked with multiple QBs. He's still worked. It's just a wild scenario. Yeah, I'm honestly going to go with Callaway as well. I think the Buccaneers put up points, which makes the Saints have to put up points. The Buccaneers secondary is banged up. This is another one, again, like pure talent. Oh, I'd much rather have Allen Robinson. Fantasy value right now, I'm taking Marquez Callaway, and I can't believe that I'm saying it.
Yeah.
Wild.
Switch into another one here. Someone Rich has had his eye on for a little bit here. And now with Miles Sanders going down, this is in a standard league, so just yards and touchdowns. Kenny Gainwell or Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper has the Vikings, and Philadelphia is playing Detroit. I believe.
Correct.
So not terrible matchups for either one. Rich, you going with your guy Gainwell?
I actually am going to go with my guy Gainwell. I don't know. I liked him a lot in preseason. He didn't look amazing last week in some relief efforts there, but I'm going to go Gainwell. Detroit has been fairly competitive in most games for a team that's still looking for their first win. Over under 48-53-ish in Dallas, Minnesota. But, I have a feeling that, especially in the standard league, Gainwell is going to find the end zone, and obviously he's going to get more opportunities than Cooper. As we've already mentioned, Cooper's target share has not been very consistent. So I'm going to go with Kenny Gainwell. I think he has a chance to really take control of that backfield. And I think, again, Detroit, while they've been somewhat competitive, is still a pretty good matchup for them. So I think they're going to lean on Gainwell a little bit. Now, obviously, Jalen Hurts takes away from that a little bit with his, running ability. And the fact that he's kind of Cam Newton-esque around the goal line at times, but I'm still going to go with Gainwell based on opportunity at the running back position and getting the ball most likely more than Mr. Cooper.
Yeah, I think I'm going to say that as well. It's so weird. Greg, you and I talked about it last week when Rich left us to fend for ourselves, that, like Miles Sanders is sweet and they just don't.
I got really drunk last week. If it makes you feel better.
That's fair. It does make me feel better. Thank you. And then they start to give Sanders the ball last week a lot early against the Raiders. Then he gets hurt. And then the thought is like, okay, well, their first drive was brilliant between Hurts and Sanders. They march down the field. Sanders goes out, but you're thinking, okay, the game plan is still let's keep running the ball. Gainwell can do that. Nope. Gainwell goes in, and they're just like, nope, let's just drop Jalen Hurts back and try and throw the ball 30 yards downfield every play. It's such a weird dynamic in that offense that it makes me uneasy, but everything to Rich's point, if we're in a standard league, I think Gainwell probably outtouches Cooper by a pretty decent margin. He's also gotten some work around the goal line in terms of being receiving. Jalen Hurts loves to dump the ball down around the goal line. Gainwell has got multiple touchdowns, like 5-yard check down scores in the red zone. So I like Gainwell a little bit, especially, again, recent news, the Dak injury, and if he's out, I'm going with Kenny G.
Hey, real quick, this question here might even be too late. Is kickoff's happening right now? Chase Edmonds or Eli Mitchell? Yeah. Super close for me. I don't feel real strong one way or the other. The full point PPR, I might give the tiebreaker to Edmonds. Half point, I might lean Mitchell. Mitchell gets more carries than Edmonds does, just because James Conner steals a fair amount of Chase Edmonds carries. I like Edmonds in full PPR, and I like him as a versatile weapon out of the backfield. I might lean Eli Mitchell.
I'm going to say slight Eli Mitchell, 52-48, but I'm fine either way.
Yeah.
Just to get
I'll go 53-47.
Price has righted me. Like, what? Just one?
So let's go around a couple things here as we're getting close to kickoff. And just any other targets we haven't talked about, and then we'll close out with some picks and some games that we like this week, maybe. Rich, any other guys you've been looking at? We've thrown a lot of names out there. Anything that you've been kind of thinking about, or in some of the leagues that you've been, actually doing legitimate research on trade targets? Who are some of the guys that maybe either you think you can go out and get because there's brighter days ahead, or simply trade targets because you're trying to build towards the future or a win now mentality?
Yeah, and so I'll expand upon some comments I made in the open. I just really like Jalen Waddle and Mike Gesicki in the Dolphins offense for not your studs, right? Because obviously it's hard to go get an Alvin Kamara or somebody like that, and unless you're in keeper leagues, and it's kind of a weird situation there. So I kind of like targeting those types of players right now. Somebody that can maybe come up and help you. I mean, again, Tua's looked decent the last couple of weeks, and I think Jalen Waddle has been a part of that. He's gotten a lot of targets over the last 2 weeks in the passing game, and he's given them a weapon that they didn't have on offense there with Miami. And Gesicki the same way. I mean, I think he's a tight end that, again, he doesn't necessarily have that name value, and if you're hurting at tight end, you might be able to go get him. Dalton Schultz has been brought up, I think, earlier in the show. I like Dalton Schultz too as a kind of a cheaper tight end target that is, I think he's ranked 5th in most league formats for Dallas. And again, somebody that you don't have to go pay, the top end tight end, the Kels type of a value. So Dalton Schultz is another guy I kind of take a look at for, people that again aren't huge name values. And then one I will throw out there, I think Nick Chubb's going to have a really nice second half. He's coming off injury. He might even play this week, so you might be a week too late as far as getting a real nice value for him. But still, depending on what the team that owns him, the situation there, and you might be able to, finagle Mr. Chubb away from that particular owner. And I think he's going to have a really nice second half for the Browns, especially with Kareem Hunt being out a couple more weeks, even though Dearness Johnson got the FedEx Ground Player of the Week against Denver. Chubb's still going to get his carries, and I think he's going to have a nice second half.
So Chubb falls right into the kind of category that I would look for. One, just from a mental standpoint, go after some of the guys who were just on bye last week. It's kind of out of sight, out of mind. The other teams just had to build a roster without those guys. You also kind of get a bonus of their bye already being done, but sometimes it's easier. And look for guys that maybe have been off to a slow start, but now have some promising trends. Laviska Shenault just had 10 targets with Jacksonville. I kind of think that Trevor Lawrence is starting to come into his own a little bit more. They're not all of a sudden going to become a great team, but he's getting some of his stuff together and making a little bit better decisions, getting himself into a better spot. That's the kind of guy that I would look towards. If you have a chance to go, I think Chubb is a great suggestion in that same mindset. The same way, no one's going to trade you Kyle Pitts. No one's going to trade you Jamar Chase. No one's going to trade you Alvin Kamara, guys that are just coming up these huge monster games. So you have to look for some of those opportunities. And I know we almost kind of poo-pooed it earlier because it was Elijah Mitchell, but if you can get Chase Claypool on the cheap, that's maybe somebody with Juju's out. They're going to have to pass the rest of the year. If you can get guys that are on a discount, you want the same idea. If you had have gone after A.J. Brown before his last game here, you probably could have bought low, and now all of a sudden he looks like A.J. Brown again the last 2 weeks, and you wish you had got in on him while you could.
Well, sticking to Pittsburgh real quick there, you mentioned Chase Claypool, but Deonte Johnson's a guy that I feel like people don't respect his name yet. He had the drops a little bit last year.
Such a high floor.
But his target 10, 12, 13. He had a weird 2-target game, but 10, 12, 13, 13 then on bye week. So, Greg, to your point of a player coming off bye now, you might want to try to get him obviously before the weekend, although I feel like Browns Steelers can be weird where nobody gets fantasy points. It could be a strange game down at the stadium this weekend in Cleveland. But Deontay Johnson's a guy that I think could really, produce very well along that Chase Claypool line, but even better. I don't know that people really respect him quite yet as a top tier wide receiver, but he certainly performs like one in certain situations.
Also, maybe some not exciting guys. No one's excited to have Adam Thielen. He's coming off a bye. He's still a really steady, nice player. Like there's guys you can go after that people are more willing to trade because they're not excited about them. And he's one of those guys that like nobody's like, oh, awesome, I got Adam Thielen. He's still pretty good. He still puts up points. Anthony, who are some of the guys that you like or strategies that you would go after?
For individual guys, I have three. Two of them have already been talked about. I love the Jalen Waddle aspect. So just like a couple advanced metrics, he's ninth. So amongst guys who have at least 20 targets, he's ninth in average separation per target at 4 yards. He's 10th in the NFL in that regard in catch percentage, and he's 15th in total targets. A guy on a team that everybody thinks sucks and is just writing off. I think you could take advantage of that a little bit and take advantage of that. And he also gets like jet sweep carries and stuff like that. They use him around the goal line. I think you could take advantage of somebody being like, yeah, I'll give you Jalen Waddle. The Dolphins suck. Very similar thing for Deonte Johnson. Rich already brought up the target share. I love that. Again, another non-sexy player on a non-sexy team. People just want to talk about how Big Ben is old and the Steelers aren't good and Mike Tomlin might go to USC, but probably not. And all they're going to do is give the ball to Najee Harris. Deonte Johnson is putting together solid week after solid week, and people are not paying attention to it whatsoever. Also, another one, Cortland Sutton. I know there's some talk with Jerry Jeudy coming back of how much his stock may potentially drop. I actually like the rapport that Bridgewater and Sutton have built together, and if Teddy could throw a little bit of a better deep ball, Sutton would have even bigger games. I believe for the year right now, he's like wide receiver 17. I know Jeudy coming back is going to take some of that target share away, but I actually think it opens up the offense a little bit more. Sutton's been seeing a lot of bracketed coverage and seeing guys over the top. And with Jeudy coming back, it shifts a little bit because you have to respect his route running and his presence in the intermediate side of the field. He's my fourth one on the list. I have him there. Waddle's next, Deonte Johnson, and then one that I mentioned earlier briefly and that all three of us are very familiar with, Calvin Ridley. I just think at some point the talent and the offense, the target share is there. He's averaging 10.4 targets per game, which is tied for third. He's only behind Cooper Kupp. Tied for fourth. He's only behind Cooper Kupp, Deebo Samuel, and Devontae Adams. The targets are there. They're just missing on a couple connections. The emergence of Kyle Pitts.
Yeah, maybe some defensive attention towards Pitts. I can see that.
Calvin Ridley's best years and seasons came as a quote-unquote wide receiver number 2 because of the attention that was paid to Julio. Kyle Pitts last week against Miami, they matched him up with linebackers. They matched him up one-on-one with Xavier Howard. He's just winning no matter what. Teams have to start shifting coverage to Kyle Pitts because he is a constant mismatch. I think that opens things up for Calvin Ridley. Atlanta has a very favorable fantasy playoff schedule as well. They get the Detroit Lions. They get the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They have multiple games indoors, so you don't have to worry about weather. He's a little bit still of a higher end, but I think if you can get somebody who is just super frustrated as hell because Calvin Ridley hasn't been Calvin Ridley, they probably spent a second or a third round pick at worst on him. Maybe they're ready to kind of cut bait. I think you could take advantage of that as well.
Real quick, Anthony, one other quick item there.
So just a moment ago, the game started. The first 4 plays by the Packers are 2 carries by Aaron Jones and 2 targets to Aaron Jones.
Yeah, makes sense. Anthony, one other thing you didn't mention with Ridley that is, I think going to fly under the radar is the return of Russell Gage as an actual kind of legitimate other wide receiver. He had a nice game last week. Unfortunately, my boy Zacharias hasn't really done what I thought he might do this year. But Russell Gage being back, again, I think that's going to take some attention maybe away from Ridley, between Kyle Pitts, like you just mentioned. So obviously a much more under the radar type of an addition to the football field. But I mean, he had a nice game last week, Russell Gage did. So I think that's also going to help Ridley having him just back.
Yeah.
So one last question here before we go into our picks to close out the show. Spin here is asking Tony Pollard, Kenny Gainwell, or J.D. McKissick. I'm real strong Gainwell out of those 3.
Same.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, but he's got. You're talking about 2 handcuff guys who probably get as much playing time as any backup running backs in the league do. So it's not far off of that. But with with Miles Sanders out of the way, right now, Kenny Gainwell's probably your safest one out of those 3 for sure. So this week, a fair amount of games going on, but some of the games we have some crazy lines this week on some of the huge spreads. Buffalo is a 13.5. I've now seen it at 14 in several books with Miami. You have the Rams with another crazy spread that's there. Rich, any of these games speaking to you so far?
So as usual, I'll do some research as we head into the weekend, and I'll put my plays out there on the old tweeter at Burn River Sports. 23-10 on the year. So check me out. Follow me on Burn River Sports. Doing very well this year with my bets. I actually think Detroit is going to get their first win of the season this week against Philadelphia at home. They're going to get 3.5. So if you're getting it at 3, I would buy the hook to get the extra half point there. Okay. So I kind of like Detroit, and I really like Detroit in a teaser. I've been actually hitting on a ton of teasers this year, which is strange because I usually don't do that. But I feel like a lot of lines have been really lend self to teaser plays. So I kind of like Detroit in a teaser as well, getting them up over a touchdown in that particular contest. In the same regard, I think the Rams are probably going to cover that line either way in Houston. But again, if you tease the Rams down under 10 points, I think that's a no-brainer against the Houston Texans in Houston. Similar with Cincinnati, I think they're going to really wax the Jets in New York. So that 10-point spread really doesn't scare me much. But again, Rams, Cincy, I know that's two road teams, home dogs tend to be scary, but Houston, the Jets are kind of two of the weakest home dogs you possibly probably go against right now. So getting those two under 10 points or things that, just taking a peek right now kind of stand out to me off the top of my head.
I like it a lot in the same way you're talking about some of those. They're being careful not to give as many of those comfortable teasers. There was a ton that were every week. It was 6.5, 7.5, and you were getting teams like the Packers, the Buccaneers, the Bills. Teams that you were getting that had a pretty high, the Cowboys, high likelihoods of winning. And that when you teased them together, all they had to do was win. And now all of a sudden those games are turning into 13.5, 14.5, 15.5. This week, the ones in that zone, it'd be Tampa Bay on the road at New Orleans. It would be the Chargers at home against the Patriots. Those would be two you could pair together. I actually like some of those same underdogs. I actually, there's a bunch of teams getting 3.5, and like Rich said, that's a really healthy hook to be able to get. I don't mind. It's some that they're not teams you want to bet on, but between Chicago and San Francisco, I don't know if one team's way better than the other. Give me the one getting 3.5 out of Carolina and Atlanta. I don't know if one of those is way better than the other one. Give me the team getting 3.5.
Seattle and Jacksonville in Seattle. Yeah. I'm taking
the
Seattle
same thing. Detroit and Philly. I don't know who's better out of those two. Give me the one getting 3.5. It's the situations like that. Heck, Washington and Denver. I don't know who's better out of those two teams. I'll take the team getting 3.5. So I got a bunch of picks this week where I'm just taking a field goal plus, where I don't know who's better out of the two teams anyways. One of them could win, and if the other one stays within a field goal, you still cover. There's a whole bunch of those that, some of them are kind of hold your nose kind of games. You don't want to bet on those kind of games. And I will say I'm going to bet against Houston every single week until I see them score more than like 8 points. That their defense is trying, but their offense cannot move the ball. One weird game against Patriots, but every other game they just cannot generate anything and are scoring 0, 5, 8, and that you can't cover any spread when you're scoring 5 and 8 points in the NFL. So even though it's ugly, I don't love ever taking over 2 touchdowns. I'm still going to take the Rams minus 14.5 because I do not believe Houston can score.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm right.
100% agree. And Ingram, I mean, they just traded an offensive weapon. I mean, not that Mark Ingram is a huge weapon for them, but I mean, Brandon Cooks is upset about it. So now you have your only good offensive player left on the team that's further upset at the franchise. So yeah, that's a tough situation.
And maybe I'll reconsider as the season goes if Tyrod starts playing. Tyrod is at least an NFL caliber player. Tyrod, MVP. My apologies to Tyrod's mother. She'll get mad at me for mispronouncing her name.
Even though he let people call him
he
Tyrod
pronounced it the other way the whole time.
Years.
But
including being at Virginia Tech and going by.
It's like Travis Kelce. It's not Kelsey, man. It's Kelce.
Yeah,
Foolish.
apparently. But yeah, it maybe at some point, if Tyrod gets back in there, I'll reconsider that. But until I see them put up points, I'm going to continue to keep betting against Houston because it's just a weird one. Anthony, what games stick out to you?
You guys mentioned two of them. I traditionally stay away from larger spreads, especially as we get towards double digits and 2 touchdowns. But I love Bengals at Jets. I just don't think Mike White and that crew is going to be able to do things.
You
against
just said
Cincinnati.
Mike White.
Joe Burrow looks tremendous, and I think an underrated piece. Cincinnati's defense.
Yes.
Jesse Bates has
Legit.
been really sweet on the back end for a couple of years.
Let me take an L real quick. I gave Trey Hendrickson a tremendous amount of crap. And I said he was purely a creation of all the other Pro Bowlers on the Saints defense. That dude looks good. He looks really good. He is playing good ball as probably the best. Like, there's not somebody else taking all the defensive attention on that Bengals front line. He looks good, and I certainly was unfair to him as a free agent.
Yeah, he's done well. They're playing fast and confident as a defense as a whole. Mike Hilton was a really nice piece for them in the secondary. I think the defense doesn't get talked about because of Burrow and Chase and everybody on that entire offense. But I love Cincy right now. They're getting it's 10.5 point spread for them. I like that all day. I love the Rams again, even though it's at 14.5 right now. I just think this one gets ugly early. The Rams are so good, and the Texans are not. And then an easier one. I know Geno isn't sexy, and apparently, Greg, you mentioned DK getting nicked up a little bit. I like Seattle at home, 3.5 points. Jacksonville's got to come all the way to Seattle. It's tough to play in Seattle. I don't like Jacksonville at all. Jacksonville, the team hates Urban Meyer. He's not good. Seattle needs a win. I think they cover that. Not with ease, but I think they cover that comfortably. Those are my big 3 there.
And one I want to bring up here, I usually am very hesitant to ever bet on the Steelers or the Cowboys because their fan bases, you pay a tax. There are so many people that just bet on the Cowboys and Steelers all the time that you pay like a point and a half tax to bet on them all the time. The Cowboys have covered every single week. They have covered over and over and over again. They're not just an offense. Like, they actually have a defense. Check in. Don't do this one ahead of time. Wait and make sure Dak is playing. If they go into Sunday night and it's still 1.5 that they basically just have to win against Minnesota, I do not think those are equal teams that should be at a pick'em kind of area. I don't know that they're going to blow them out. I think the Vikings are a game team, and I don't think the Cowboys have some monstrous shutdown defense. But the Cowboys are good. I think the Cowboys are good, and I feel comfortable that I think they're going to go in on a fast turf in Minnesota. That offense is. It's hard to find an answer defensively with so many options. Zeke and Pollard and CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper and now Michael Gallup coming back and both Schultz and Jarwin. And the offensive line is looking healthy again. If Dak stays healthy, which obviously, is a huge part for him, that team's going to be tough to beat. And if he's playing going into Sunday night, I'll be putting in a wager on the Cowboys.
I like that.
Yeah, and one last one. I know you mentioned the Steelers, and I agree. You do at times have to pay the tax. The Browns are in a weird spot right now. Who knows if Baker's going to play, if Case Keenum's playing, if Chubb's playing. The Browns are just in a very strange spot with all these injuries right now. So, and I know teaser, but I've been hitting on teasers all year. I will. Give me 9.5. I'll take the 9.5 points. Tease Pittsburgh up to 9.5, with maybe Detroit up to 9.5, or maybe Cincinnati down to 4.5. I'll take Cincinnati 4.5 and the Steelers getting 9.5. I would love to see my Browns blow the Steelers out at home and Baker come and, have a Baker game and crazy stuff happen, or Chubb come back and run for 200 yards. But I personally don't see that right now. So I'm probably going to look to tease the Steelers up to 9.5 this week in some fashion, and hope the Browns, win, but Steelers cover the 9.5.
No, it makes a lot of sense. I think you could put that one right in there. Either taking the Chargers down to just a win against the Patriots, taking Tampa just down to a win against New Orleans, or like you said, maybe give Detroit 9.5. Detroit has been a game team every single week. They've hung with everybody. I don't think Philadelphia is in the spot to blow anybody out. So you got Detroit at home looking for their first win. You're giving me a touchdown plus. I think that's a nice one. The Steelers and Lions both getting 9.5. That's a healthy number.
The Lions play real hard, all jokes aside, for like Dan Campbell.
for
Like
real.
they play hard every week. They gave the Rams a good run for their money. They gave a healthy Niners team a good run for their money opening week, to your point. Like they've tried hard every week, and this could be a week against an Eagles team that refuses to make adjustments on both sides of the ball, and they could get got.
All right, real quick, we got 2 last-minute questions, 10-second answer. Should I trade Robert Woods for T. Higgins and Julio Jones? No.
Yes.
Okay. 2 no's and a yes. Should I trade Ezekiel Elliott? I'm just going to stop reading. Ezekiel Elliott and Jacoby Myers for Justin Jefferson and Daryl Henderson?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd take
Yes.
Jefferson and Henderson. I like Zeke a lot. Daryl Henderson's a steady running back, and
Yes.
Jefferson's maybe the best player out of those 4.
Punch that accept button or send button, either way, right now.
All right, guys. This has been a great show. Awesome engagement as well. Really appreciate you guys. We're going to keep riding with you here, at least through the fantasy regular season here, and then a lot of fun
Forever.
stuff as we get going here and being able to help you guys bring home some fantasy championships. Make sure you're following Rich at Burn River Sports. Make sure you're following Anthony at pro__ANT. You can find me at Greg Tompsett. Always having fun in the Slack channel. Come check us out there. Check out all the stuff on the YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe so you know every time we're going live. Download the Underdog Fantasy app. Use promo code Cover1. Get yourself $10 free. Be able to jump in there. I'm going to try to make myself a little bit of money tonight. I have a fair amount of Aaron Jones ones going for this evening. But make sure you're checking us out, having a good time. On behalf of Rich Haynes and Anthony Prohaska, I am Greg Tompsett. You've been listening to Cover1 Fantasy, and we are out.